so many people have problems with flooding because it's just not used to this much rain. They can't, I think it's the road, but it's not, All right, ready to start public hearings?
Yep.
Okay, local law, I don't know what we're up to.
I don't know how we're going to reference this, because they're not assigned, except for 183, they're not assigned number.
Oh, well, it's whatever the next one is. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first public hearing is for Chapter 113, which would be peddling and soliciting. The purpose of it is to rescind Chapter 113, peddling and soliciting of the village code. Would anybody like to speak to that?
Yes, I have one correction, we talked about it last Thursday. On the second page, it says the purpose of this chapter is, the second line. The purpose of this chapter is to rescind Chapter 113, peddling and soliciting of the Poquott Village Code. And it reads that peddling and soliciting of the Poquott Village Code, without looking to peddle or solicit the village code. So I would like to propose that the wording is to rescind Chapter 13 of the Poquott Village Code, peddling and soliciting.
You got it. Any
And I
other?
think actually in 2.1, it may apply there as well.
Okay, 2.1.
Rescinding Chapter 113, peddling and soliciting.
Yeah, sorry.
113 of the Poquott Village Code,
Yeah.
and then nothing personal code.
This is it.
Anyone else? Okay.
Is this when we get to talk?
Yeah. This is for Chapter 113.
Right, yeah. Can you just, I'm sorry, can you just do an overview? This isn't to mean that we're allowing peddling and soliciting, or is it?
No. You
No?
want to explain the lawsuit?
Yeah,
It gives us time to, the code that we have has been challenged in court. And, I forgot to mention that as one of the open cases, I'm sorry, I apologize. The code that we have with some other villages has been challenged. And basically on a basis of free speech, so people are claiming that you can't restrict free speech with an anti-soliciting statute. The people that are challenging our code, when I found out about this, I did an investigation and I found out that Suffolk County actually has, this is actually regulated by the Suffolk County Department of Consumer Affairs, and in order to provide service in Suffolk County, you have to have a license, and in order to advertise that service, you have to have another license. So the people that are challenging this these villages regulations have neither of the Suffolk County licenses. So we're trying to get the case thrown out, but in the meantime, we need to rescind our local law. It's clear that we need to rescind our code and develop something else, basically. It's my recommendation that we rescind our chapter and develop something else.
and that something else would be what? If they're challenging the current law that says, or the code that says you can't solicit or peddle, then what?
Yeah, so you can do things like, instead of an outright ban, you can have things like you can only do it certain hours. The people that are doing it have to register with the village and things like that. You can have certain criteria, but you cannot have an outright ban, basically. So that's what we're. What the village has to do, we really don't have a choice, is rescind our code as it is, and then come up within the next couple of weeks of a new chapter, which has those criteria in it.
So in villages and towns that have something that allows people to come into it, that are licensed, in fact, people are being solicited, and their villages are being solicited, and
The residents are, yes.
residents are being
Yes.
solicited and peddled. And what does soliciting mean exactly? Does it mean someone can enter your property and knock on the door and say, I'm so-and-so and I want to sell you a product? Or?
Yes. Leave something on your property, go up to your door, yes.
Uh-huh. And that doesn't violate trespassing issues?
Well, there's other criteria for trespassing. You have to have a sign on your property that says no trespassing, or no soliciting. You can have that sign.
Oh,
But that's a direction from you, not from the village.
Okay, so that would be something that if you have to do this, then we could all then learn to do that. Just put a no soliciting sign, and that would take care of any worry that we would have, that we'd be, bothered by people.
Yes.
And what does it mean for people that want to come in, like with their truck, like the ice cream people or the wet food trucks or whatever else? Does that expand that we have to agree to those kind of
We'll
things?
deal with that in the new regulations. It depends on what people want. I mean, if that's something that bothers people. The board, I haven't heard that comment yet. I don't think that is necessarily peddling, but that will come up in the public hearing on a new law when it's ready. Unless, people want to express a feeling about that.
Well, I don't want anybody coming into the village. The ice cream truck bothers me every time it comes in. That insipid little da-da-da-da-da-da, like always comes at a time when I'm like trying to like have peace and quiet. And I don't know why that ever got through, but yeah, I think we've already dilated
This
that.
has been, other places have had very expensive litigation involving this, trying to support their peddling statutes, and it's my recommendation that we just take it off the books and come up with something more like what I recommend.
So basically, Mr. Poquott, what you're saying is that somebody who's licensed in the county, the state, can go door to door? Clearly, they can't park on the street, but can they go door to door?
No, what I said was that the first criteria is you have to have a Suffolk County license.
Okay, but I'm a realtor, so I have a state
You
license.
have to have a Suffolk County license to do business and Suffolk County license.
Could you please answer that
advertise.
question?
And then
I have a state license, so.
whether you could go door to door, you can regulate people going door to door, but you have to do it with defined criteria. The defined criteria can be
Okay.
things like you can restrict it to certain hours of the day or the week.
But we don't have that yet.
You can have people. You can have the names of the people that are actually going door to door. You can require that the company provides you
I'm
with
not asking what
those names.
can come down the road. I'm asking, once we rescind this law, what happens till we have the new law?
Then it would be regulated by Suffolk County, and also the individual homeowners through what I just described.
Yeah, that I understand.
No processing, or no soliciting, or no
trespassing.
trespassing.
Yeah. And what exactly is peddling?
I don't have a definition for that, I'm sorry.
So we're
Is
gonna
that
vote
right?
on the law, we don't have a definition of?
We're not creating a peddling law.
But we're taking it away, but how can we take something away when we don't know what it is?
Over there.
It's an old law. It's from like 1930.
Yeah, but what is it? That's my question, what is peddling?
Google.
I'd like to know.
I say Google it, tell us what it
Here,
is.
you want it? I got it.
Oh,
No,
there you go.
I'm asking the
Yeah,
board
what's-
who's voting on something that they
What
don't
is
even
it?
know what it is.
Well, maybe
Right, but I got
maybe
the-
the reason
I
why
got
it's
the-
taken
I
off the
don't
books is-
rely on Google.
Go ahead, I do.
It's actually Merriam-Webster, and it says to try to sell something, especially small goods, by going from house to house or place to place.
But
No M&Ms.
And let me just say, my concern is that the board is voting on something that they didn't know until we Googled what the definition was. End of conversation, I'm done.
No, because
You
you
asked
throw
for a
something
specific
out at us
definition.
and then you don't allow us to explain. The explanation is we're
You'll have
voting
enough time
to
to explain,
rescind
don't worry.
something. We are voting to rescind something. We don't have to get into definitions at this point.
Okay, good.
I think your point might be delved into when we craft the new law.
Okay.
Right now, all we want to do is get this off the books for legal reasons, and we're going to vote on that.
Okay.
So the definition of whatever's in that law is really irrelevant.
Doesn't matter, I understand.
You made your point.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
We're not going to do the other one?
Yeah, I'm gonna do one at a time.
Oh.
Some I can close, some might not. depending
Oh, so you
on-
have to close it.
Yeah, okay. So this is a public hearing for New, it's gonna be local law 2018. It'll be creating a chapter 46, which will be building and construction for Poquott. It's village code. And the purpose of it is to remove buildings and construction regulations from the zoning chapter 183 and create a new chapter creating these provisions. So the comments we got back from the building department was just the inspections that you had in here.
I think in this copy,
Oh, is this the new one?
I'm not sure,
Same one,
the
right?
inspection is split, really, I wasn't.
We have,
It's just the big tail of it.
Yeah.
Back in the second page. H, the building inspector, that's re-inspection.
yes. And then
Yeah, page
underneath
4.
that, it says foundation, footings, oh wait, this is right, wall, foundation and waterproofing has to be complete. Second inspection is framing, outside using a rough plumbing has to be complete. Third inspection is the entire construction, yes, okay, so it's, this is right.
Yeah, I got this
Okay.
from Cindy, so I
Yeah.
incorporated all
Okay,
those.
she wanted to just make sure it was in
So
there.
what you
Okay.
have, what everybody has is the, so far, the final copy until unless we have more suggestions for change.
Okay. Any comments for chapter 46?
I have a question.
Name, address?
Felicia Chilak, Washington Street. I have a question on one of the definitions I don't quite understand. It says parking area off-street, and my question is, do residents need to apply for a variance to park on a separate lot? And it says something about grandfathering, I don't understand that, and what are the recorded documents that's going to be?
Where are you?
I don't think we're on the right one.
You don't have a page. We're talking about the,
My page.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the zoning, so I apologize.
Any comments on
You're ahead of
chapter
zone.
46?
I'm zoning chapter.
Zoned out.
Okay, so a motion to close chapter 46.
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
If you're still open for comments. I'm just wondering, under definitions, you talk about alterations and modifications. Are those the same thing? And if you replace something with something that's already there, is that either of those?
Where are you?
Local law 46, page 2. There's a long list of bulleted points. The third one discusses alterations. Further down under plumbing, there's in electrical is talk about modifications.
Oh, here. Okay.
I think I can answer that because this was done in discussing with our building inspector, Poquott. What we're trying to do, first of all, is a kind of a global thing, is to bring us into conformity with the international codes and working with
Right.
local other villages and like. So the thinking is that if work is being done that should be inspected, which is to say that he would have to go and check to see that it was done correctly, a permit should be applied for.
Right.
So, and it all makes sense to me anyway, that if you do a construction or an alteration that, for example, is going to be supporting something, roof, stairs, or whatever, it should be done correctly, which means that it should be inspected, which means that he would have to come by and inspect it so there's notification to the village, his time is paid for and the like. So the thinking was for licensed trades such as plumbing and electrical, that would be something that if you applied for the permit and showed that it was done by a licensed professional, he would come by, but the presumption is going to be that it's going to be done correctly. But the concern has always been that people do things themselves. And they say that they really haven't changed their kitchen, they just kind of put in new cabinets, but also they ran a couple of new sockets and they did different things. So as a global statement, the idea is if you do something with electrical changes or plumbing changes, even though you might think that you wouldn't otherwise need a permit, you will under this.
So if you don't, so what counts as a change? I mean, if I have a broken water pipe and I replace the water pipe, is that a change?
It depends, usually most of the people put in page 1, and then Mike meets them and tells them whether they have to apply for a permit or not, depending on what the work is.
Because I think there's a lot of room for interpretation since the process gets initiated by the person who wants the work done, and they can say, well, it's not really a modification, I just broke a pipe and I'm gonna solder in a
Well,
piece to replace.
I don't know if you were involved with some of the earlier discussions we had at these open meetings. The way it was resolved was, this is what should be done. We're not the secret police, and we're not gonna knock on the door and see what you've been up to, but the right way to do it is to fill out the first page of that form. It's just a notification. You can describe what you're going to do. And there may be many instances where, somebody wants to put in a new trap under their sink, and it's a pretty straightforward thing, and Mike says, it's not a big problem. You could just go.
We get them every single week, Roger.
So
Every
it
week.
says in here that you have to do page 1 for any change on a property.
Most people should be doing page 1 to see whether
But
they
it
need a building
doesn't
permit or not.
does it say it in here?
Well, work backwards. If it needs a permit, yes, you start with the page 1. If you're not sure,
Start with page 1.
start with page 1.
I think we
There's a
got-
list of
What
things,
if you're sure you don't need it?
then you don't need it.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay, so
why
that's-
that was a real driving point in my putting this list
Right.
together, is because there are some things that we know you do not need a building permit for, and so you don't have to bother with the page 1. The real issue gets into, that gray area that you're talking about. Let us take a look at it. And the first thing would be page 1, it's on paper. The second thing would be with Mike, or the building inspector would go and see what you're up to and tell you if you need a permit for it. But at least we have policy and procedure in place now, that there's some consistency here.
How, like you said, you've been getting a lot of stuff into the week. Like, how many things have been getting kicked back where, like, look, you don't need it? Is it just extra paperwork that you don't need, where it's just a simple thing that doesn't need to be done?
Extra paperwork for what?
Well, just saying, like, someone's changing all the fan, and you need an electrician for that. I mean, is it? What I'm asking is, do you see a lot of things that Mike's just saying you don't need a permit for? Or is
It
it?
depends. Yeah.
I'm just saying, like say out of 10 is like half. It's just curious as Mike's getting getting tons of paperwork.
I've never tracked it, but for the most part, people call and they ask what it is, and Mike runs over and we'll either look at it and say, yep, you gotta fill out the thing, and say we move from there.
I can tell you, John, that Mike has said a number of times that he's run over to somebody's house and said, "You're fine, here's how you do it."
Mhm.
That very often.
Right.
I think it would be, just to follow up, I think it'd be useful to get that kind of report from the building inspector summarizing just how many times each of these options was pursued. Because you might get a little more confidence in the building procedures if say, a third of the inquiries didn't result in a statement that you needed a building permit, just something that sort of, as I say, gave some confidence to that.
There's a trade-off.
If I can make a comment? Sure.
There is a trade-off between burying the small office with unnecessary paperwork, if we're just tracking something that has marginal utility. But I mean, we're certainly kicking around amongst us and see if we want to incorporate that. I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, so I think part of the process has been trying to come up with a way that makes sure that we're seeing what we should see, and that what we don't see, if it's wrong, that the village is not accepting liability for that action, right? So that's kind of really the trick here, isn't it? Okay, to make sure that if you're making a decision for yourself that this doesn't need a building permit, that you're making a decision not to follow our process, which means the village is not responsible for what you're doing. Okay, and that's what all of these regulations are designed to do, is to avoid the village having liability. They are fiduciaries to the village, and it's their obligation to make sure that they try to minimize liability onto the village, and that's what they're doing. As far as does the practice work? Sure. As one of the people who gets page 1 notification, we get 2 or 3 a week, okay, and a good percentage of them are, there's nothing else to do, you're done, you finish what you're doing, and certain isn't. Why would we analyze something that's so trivial as that? This is the job of the 2 paid staff members that are on site here, the clerk, and this is the job of the volunteer building inspector, the volunteer environmental engineer, okay? No, only the clerk gets
No,
paid.
building inspector gets paid.
Okay, so, right, so, but that's part of the process, that's what
Yeah,
he's offering.
I'm not denying that.
Right, so my point being is that that's what the whole thing is designed to do.
Right,
So it's
so-
not there to
so is
control
there-
you or do
But I mean,
anything
in
of that
terms
nature.
of, well, so, I'll just add here, I'm not sure it's a good idea, but I have the honor of paying taxes in some other town which will, for some amount of money, issue you a statement that you don't need a building permit and charge a fee for that. So, but at least it gets it on the books in a place that someone can look it up that says, I asked to do this, and you said a permit wasn't required.
Right,
Okay.
But
you
what
have
we've
that.
just heard is there's
You have
no
You have that.
tracking of,
Everything that comes to the clerk's office is tracked, isn't it?
okay, so, but it's not tracked to the point where one can say at the end of a month, we got 50 requests and 30 of them we said nothing had to happen, and 10 we said just
What
an
relevance would
inspection
that
and
bring to the
5.
process?
Well, as I said, it will, if the part of the village's idea is to,
Making a mountain out of a molehill. No, it's
No.
fine, but we'll discuss it.
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
you make
'cause
a
I think
point,
it's-
there is a trade-off, and we'll just
well, I
have
think
to
in terms
work
of
it
the
out.
village liability, if you know that I mean, if the village is fine with people trying to do stuff that maybe should have a permit but they can get away with, then that's fine. But
That's
if-
exactly what it prohibits.
Right.
That's
Well, I
exactly
was
what it
just
prohibits
told
you.
that-
No, that's exactly what it prohibits.
But didn't just someone say this is a question of liability, and if
Yeah, I
you
just
do
said that.
something without a permit, then the village isn't liable.
Right.
So that's a different statement from saying, the village wants to control it.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
looking for,
Okay.
you're looking to find out what
All
the
right,
range is?
we have your, you make a
Okay.
good point. We'll bring it up at the building meeting next week. Thank you. Any other comments?
I just think the point he's trying to make is that you have to put every little thing, like
We
I
got
said,
his
change
point.
the
He's
law.
very pleased.
Well, I know, but I mean, I just,
Let me speak.
I think a lot of people have the same, the same.
Excuse me?
Come on.
Don't tell me to shut up, Rich.
Please stop.
It's not worth.
But what
Just, I'm trying, all right, well,
Lot of
that's
noise.
there's no reason to talk to anybody like that.
Mhm.
All I'm saying is, I just think, well, what my feeling is, I mean, from stuff that I've been gone through too, is that every little thing that we have to go through is like, if they go through, like, even a fence. I mean, if it's like in kind, and like, I need to file a permit for it.
There's no election sign anymore.
Exactly, that's my point. I mean, but it's still in there, I'm still reading, I'm saying, all right, well, that's, I think what his concern
It's
is,
not
every
still
little
in there.
thing you do,
It's
like,
not
I
still
mean,
in
well.
Did you read it?
I did read it.
It's not in there.
I understand that.
Right.
But I have read it in the past. But my point being is someone brought to my attention, they said, I was having my floor sanded, do you need a permit for that? And they had public safety knocking
How
on
would
their
you know
door.
if they need a permit for it?
Well, when I'm asking my question, the public safety has their door, they said, well, what work are you getting done? They said, no, my floor sanded. You don't need a permit for that. Get your floor sanded.
Do you
Am
know?
I wrong?
No,
All
do
they have
you
to do
know
is fill
if
out
you
a
need
page
You don't need a permit.
So you have to
Okay,
pull,
my
they have
point
to
being
pull
is,
the
why is
village wall.
public safety knocking on this person's door saying what work you done? It's, they sand floors. That's, look, I'm just bringing something to light that he's talking about, that you said we don't want to be police and come in.
No,
Well,
it's fine.
they did come up there and say that, and people were concerned, said, you're gonna floor sanded, that's it. So I think that's what Roger was trying to bring across, that's all.
The question here is, if you see a tradesman's truck in somebody's driveway, and there's no permit on file for work being done,
Right.
the question's asked,
What
what's
he's
being
doing.
done?
Our sewer's clogged, I mean, it could be a plumber, you know,
Fine.
just,
Fine,
Where's the harm?
That's it.
He asked, it was answered, and the system worked.
So I'll just suggest that there be a way that one can post I asked for a permit, but you told me I didn't need it signed, so there's not some harassment.
That's the page one.
That's the page.
No,
they want it on their
Joe just
property.
mentioned a building permit. So that a building permit had to be showed. Why not also show a statement that says a building permit, page one was filled out and it wasn't necessary, so I shouldn't be.
Instead it'll be abused.
No, but that's,
Get to it.
That page
that, you
one
make
is
a
on
good
record.
point, thank you.
You'll give the information.
Yes, there's me on the right. That's not question anymore.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do it every week. Anyway, so, okay, any other comments for 46?
Yeah, I don't understand, something
Name,
about,
address,
Oh, Susan Laskowski. I live in Poquott. Well, I don't have to tell you my address. I don't really want to tell my address. The fees, I don't understand, and I'm sorry I didn't read the whole thing, but I didn't there was something and I read, it sounded like you would, the village would assess the approximate amount of construction and then issue a fee based on that amount.
We have a fee chart that the building department uses that we approved last year in December, and that's the chart that's used. So each project changes based on what the fee is.
Okay, so, that's not attached to any of this
No,
stuff.
it changes all the time. So,
The fee
yeah.
chart changes
It
all the
only has
time.
to involve the board to change it, so it's not in the code, so we wouldn't have to have a public hearing.
Okay, but I'm understanding this correctly. It's based on the percentage of, if you build a house, you're gonna pay a larger
It's
amount.
online, if you go online, you can see the whole schedule.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments for 46? Do I have a motion to close 46? Local law blank of 2018 creating chapter 131 stormwater. The purpose of this chapter is to create a chapter for stormwater control for the village of Poquott Code. Now, I believe, Jeff, didn't we take this out of,
This is from 183.
it's out of 183, right?
This is,
Okay.
as far as I remember, I have read each one of these line by line. So, once my eyes rolled up in my head, I don't remember if I made any grammatical changes, but there were no substantive changes to this section. It was just pulled out of 143, and now it's going to have...
183.
183, rather, and it's going to stand alone. And I like, by the way, that it is a separate chapter. I tried to combine the two, but this works better, especially this sequential.
So I took the language from 183 and copied it into this law, and the only thing that was changed was the numbers, paragraph numbers.
Did you include the zoning section? There's a section 16 is up under zoning, which includes stormwater separate. It's confusing because you have two different places.
The SWIP section?
Stormwater,
Yeah,
is that the stormwater management?
under zoning, yeah, it's just a subsection.
That was what I was going to combine and make each one of them a separate article.
Okay.
But Joe's kept stormwater management, which is already in existence, we don't change it, and we just taken this thing out of 183, has it as a standalone, more easily.
Right, but it takes both, is all. Just saying, it takes both from the
Yes, we
zoning
didn't
portion.
get rid of either one, and now they're sequential in terms of number. So I think that's good.
Felicia?
Felicia Chilak, Washington Street. I just need some clarity. I understand that you copied whatever, but I need some clarity on a couple of things. On page 3, number 2, it talks about a fee schedule, but where do I find that fee schedule? 3, paragraph, well, not 2, it's 131-3, number 2.
It's double-sided, so.
Page 3.
The stormwater, I'll read it to you. Stormwater Management Officer may review the plans upon approval by the Village Board of Trustees of the Village of Poquott, engage the services of a registered professional engineer to review the plans, specifications, and related documents at a cost not to exceed a fee schedule established by said governing board. Where do I find that fee schedule?
The building permit,
Excuse me?
the building permit.
And it's specific for stormwater
You want to do something
management?
separate instead of just
Yeah,
asking me what building?
the thing is...
I can't hear you, sorry.
We have to stop talking.
Yeah, stop talking. The law would be,
Excuse me?
the law's going to be created. Whenever we vote on the law, then we set the fee schedule.
Okay.
We don't do it the other way
We
around.
have,
So
we could
there's-
just, we could pull it out and make it separate, and we could
It
also,
is going to be separate, the same
Okay.
way the other fee schedule you mentioned before is separate, so
Can we talk about doing this globally, because every time fees go up, we don't have to go through this whole.
well, the punitive fees have to be in the statute, but a filing fee like this shouldn't be in the statute.
And part 2 of my question is, on this particular chapter, or whatever you want to call it, is the village paying the review cost or the applicant?
most of the time we bill the
Yeah.
applicant. And
The village pays it and the applicant reimburses.
so that's- Yeah, okay.
Okay, and then I have another question. On page 4, it makes reference to, let me just find, a building of 100 square feet, I have to find the number, on building, and it calls occupying more than 100 square feet of area. But in all the other documents or laws or whatever requirements, it generally refers to something as 144 square feet.
I'm actually glad you found that. Because that is an oversight.
Okay.
But once we
One bill.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Then I have on page 11, part B. And it says about requiring qualified professionals conduct site inspections. So somebody has to hire an outside professional to do a site inspection?
It's usually the village engineer and the environmental commissioner.
But does it say that? No, it says the applicant shall have a qualified professional conduct site inspections.
It doesn't proscribe bringing in and out.
Well, it doesn't say the village engineer either.
Well,
I just
they're already
wanted-
It says qualified
They're
professional.
already
Yeah, but-
qualified.
But can I hire my own qualified
It
professional?
doesn't drive it.
Okay, so I'm just asking. I want to be clear when my
That's
client
clear.
asks me. And part 2, the maintenance easements,
What page?
same page, page 11. Prior to the issuance, I guess you could all read that, but, so you're going to require a restriction to a deed? I need to understand that. It's part 2 and part 4. I want to understand clearly when somebody asks me about a maintenance easement or a maintenance agreement. Is it a deed restriction? Like with Kyle Crescenzo, he had to do something with the stones on the steps. Was that a deed restriction? What is a maintenance agreement and will it be a deed restriction?
No, that's not finance.
I don't think that applies.
No.
No, but-
Sure, and it's not something that I would.
But that was
I'm not
part
gonna-
of his
I would-
building permit.
Well,
are we
he's
talking
not,
about
he's not,
Cal
he's not number one.
Because
We're
I'm
talking
just
about-
asking, because that is
So be
kind of a
non-specific
maintenance
about it. We
thing.
can just be non-specific and.
What is your question? What is an
My
easement?
question is,
When needed.
is it executing a maintenance agreement and will it be a deed restriction?
When needed.
Excuse me?
When needed.
Who determines when it's needed?
She's on
Number
page
11,
11.
the same
B.
page. Number 11.
So,
Number 2 and 4.
may I?
No, I'd like the attorney to answer that, please.
And what section?
Would you like to explain?
Page-
Page 11.
Page 11, 2, and 4.
So I'll give the board my input on it. So the way that works is that if you have a complicated structure, it requires maintenance in order to comply with the stormwater regulations, okay, as far as making sure that it's going to be operational for the next 50 years, you can make a decision that they need to have a deed, something that's in there, it's a deed notice, okay, what would be considered an administrative control, okay, to make sure that it happens. So a maintenance schedule can be on there, and it can be